Hey, welcome to the Value Added Podcast. Jared and Bill here, as you probably well know. Hey, today's going to look just a bit different. We're going to just be having a conversation. We got a couple of questions that we kind of want to ask of each other, giving you guys a window into how our minds work, leadership-wise. We've talked a lot about leadership being a journey, so we're going to do a little bit of reflection, kind of back on ourselves over the years, and see kind of where we have come and from and where we are now and perhaps where we're going. So encourage you to just sit back and enjoy and drop us a comment, or if you'd like to connect, if anything kind of sticks out to you, let us know. But we're praying that the conversation just blesses you.
Yeah, or answer one of the questions yourselves in the comments. We'd love to hear from you on some of your experiences too. And don't know if we're going to post this as one longer episode or we break this up, one episode per question.
Yeah, it depends on how talkative we are.
It depends how the conversation goes. So, so we'll see. We'll see about it.
Yeah, we may be looking at each other more than the camera today, so hopefully that's okay.
Yeah. So our first question we got this morning is, how has your experience or journey, leadership journey, shaped who you are and your approach to leadership?
What a fantastic question.
Well, it's yours.
Yeah, that's why I said it.
No, it was really, and I even commented when you thought of this. This is a really good reflective question to think about.
Yeah, I mean, we talk a lot about, you and I talk all the time about
we do.
Reflecting on your own experience and that journey kind of shaping not only the person you become, which is, I think, really important, but also your approach to how you connect and lead others.
Yeah.
So I know for me, when I think of this, my journey, right? I started in the ministry realm, which is where I'm currently leading, obviously. I started this journey, I was early teens, 12, 13, and maybe even before that, just, in the church setting, in these, programs, being trained without knowing, that was kind of a training for leadership within the church role. And then reflecting back on that now, I can see, just how the experience of growing up in the church, having the Bible programs, the Awana programs, the vacation Bible schools.
Typical church stuff. Yep.
Typical church programs. Then being homeschooled on top of that was another kind of nail in that coffin of where you're going, if I can say it that way.
Do you think homeschooling had an impact on the type of leader you are today versus would have gone to the public schools?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. And, I'm still fleshing that out, to be honest. I'm 40 years old. Like I said, I've lived a lot of life, but I think I got a lot of life left to live. But as I look back on the homeschooling part of it, I think that I got a really good biblical education through my homeschool.
Yep.
So through church and then through being homeschooled, where, we always had family devotions, and then, my mother would mix in the Bible to almost everything she taught.
Right.
We had biblically based curriculums that we used.
Of course.
Like our science, was, from a creation standpoint, those kinds of things. So that kind of homeschooling education, I think, would answer that question as absolutely moving into that.
Well, I guess my question, thank you. But I'm thinking in the back of my mind as I asked that, and I should have clarified a bit more. Do you think that you were emotionally more developed, or emotional intelligence was higher, as the buzzword is these days, having been homeschooled? Because I asked that because of this. My kids were homeschooled not for their entire, but for the later half of their school years.
Sure.
My youngest I would work from home, and she was being homeschooling. She would be watching me.
Yeah.
And then she went off to school in Florida for an 11-month program on digital filmmaking. And she said, "Dad, I had to make cold calls, scout locations, and I learned to talk to people by listening to your meetings."
Oh, yeah.
Right? So I'm just wondering, because you're not hanging around more peers than you would be. So what was your peer time like? What was versus the amount of time you spent homeschooling with adults? And do you think that impacted who you are?
Yeah, I think it definitely did. I think there was I wouldn't say I'm, better off emotionally or whatever because I was homeschooled. I have friends that grew up in the public school who are doing really well, emotionally, and they're great parents, and they've got a great, education and a great,
Everyone's journey is different.
Yeah, but I would say for me personally, I mean, my folks did a really good job of, yes, we're homeschooling you, but here are the various areas where we're plugging you in for that peer time you mentioned.
Okay.
So I grew up playing sports. You know, we grew up in a small town New England setting. So I grew up playing Little League. My dad coached, for a few years. I played baseball all the way through high school. So sports was one of those ways where I connected a lot. I learned those lessons that, we often teach here
Yep.
on the podcast that you learn, through sports, and how to
In a very
lose
tactile
and how to
way.
win and, how to connect with people, during that setting. So that was I think a good thing my parents did. We also were part of a couple different homeschool groups, and then our church was fairly large, and we had a fairly large youth program. 60, 70 kids coming out every Sunday afternoon. And that's where I got a good mix of other homeschoolers, but also public schooled kids, private schooled kids. I think my best friend group, I had 2 kids who went to public school, one went to private school, and I was homeschooled.
Yeah.
So even the 4 of us kind of
Had a mix.
Going on. So thankfully, my parents didn't over shelter when they homeschooled. It was, yes, we want to keep you from some things, but we also want to give you a lot of others. Yeah. So I think emotionally, what solidified it, I think, for both my brother and I is when we reached the high school years, we ended up doing a work study program. So I was homeschooled, but then during the afternoons, we would go up to the local camp, the Bible camp here in our town. And that's where we began to take on more leadership responsibility.
Yeah.
And so I see that part of my journey through high school really being kind of what solidified, in the church setting, we call it a calling. I mean, I kind of felt like, man, I'm going to be doing something to do with the Lord's work, with my life.
Yeah.
And kind of working at camp, I think, kind of helped solidify that at a young age. Even though I went into building construction for a good 5 or 7 years after graduating, I never parted ways with being plugged into the camp or the church. So I would say, to answer that, that's a very long answer to your question about kind of the emotional, was I any better off emotionally or whatnot? I would say for me personally, I don't think I was better off, but I think my journey really prepared me for what I do now.
Yeah, it wasn't so much more of being better off for another, and I agree with you 100%. It's unique to the individual, and I know some individuals thrive better in the public school setting. I think it was more of, did you think it added skills to you that you wouldn't have had otherwise?
Yeah, 100%. And I say that simply because, it's multifaceted. One, because of what I do now is what I did back then. So, putting teams together, leading teams, I started that journey at camp.
Yeah.
Ministry to young people, I started that journey at camp.
Yeah.
And then, the pastoral roles, all of those things prepared me for the pastoral role. Because it's not only working with people, the whole teaching aspect of that. I actually started at camp, so it was I had a counseling that I did, for one summer. So I can look back and say, man, my homeschool program, my work study homeschool program in high school, all of that had prepared me for what I do now. And I think too, what the other thing I don't want to skip over is being homeschooled. And if you're homeschooled, you'll know this. Or if you were homeschooled, you'll know this. When you're homeschooled and you go to get plugged into your community, it is a little bit harder because the kids in the community all go to school together for the most part.
Built in.
So when I joined, like for instance, I really started to feel it when I went to, when I switched from like Little League and minors to high school baseball. That was where I felt the disconnect. So that's where I had to start plugging into my personhood of just being outgoing and being able to connect easy with people.
Yeah.
That's where I really started to hone in on those skills. How can I connect with these guys when I don't even go to school with them? I see them at baseball practice, every day for spring training. And then you're building these relationships kind of sort of from scratch.
Yeah.
A couple of them I played with on the same Little League team. Others I just kind of played against them, Little League, but I didn't go to school with them. So I didn't have that. A lot of them were good best friends and they knew each other. Then the girls would ride with us because they were on the softball team and they would ride to the same games. Same thing. I was like, I knew some of these girls, but I didn't know most of them. How am I going to get to know them? So I had to kind of dive into who Jared is as an extrovert. So I think that helped me.
So it sounds like there was a skill in there you developed or, intentionally or not, you practiced making connections.
Yeah. And I wouldn't have known that in the moment.
Right.
But I can only look back and say, well, if I'm talking about my experience in my journey, being homeschooled, then thrown into a bus and onto teams with these public schoolers,
Yep.
yes, I kind of knew who they were, knew them by name, knew a couple of them, but really deepening relationships happened because I was homeschooled. So I had to actually use those skill sets,
Gotcha.
develop them, and use them.
Just is there a particular experience at camp that you said this was a really, in hindsight, the really good leadership learning moment?
For sure. I mean, so one of my roles up there that was facilities. So it was my main job was facilities, and my boss, the late Bill Hackala, he was our facilities director, but he also did the lakefronts. He did the rappelling, off the mountain.
Right.
He coordinated that, and then we
Right.
also had a high and low ropes course
Right.
that he would coordinate. So the ropes course is where, in the program that we had, we would bring the students through various, obstacles in the trees and on the ground and all this stuff. I really learned a lot about leadership in those moments. Being up on a platform in a tree, trying to encourage, people who never thought they could do a ropes course, actually getting them through it, just using words of encouragement, words of affirmation, showing them how to do it. You watch me do it, then I'll do it with you, then you do it by yourself. That whole thing, I got to learn that in real time with real people, at 15, 16, 17 years old.
Wow.
So that for me was huge. And then I look back and I could say, yeah, I can use those principles in what I do now.
That must have been kind of like a bright moment when you get someone to do it and they're successful and they realize,
Yeah,
wow, I didn't know I had this in me kind of thing. And
absolutely.
yeah.
It was a really cool, really neat experience. You get, high fives from strangers, hugs from strangers. They were so excited that they made it, and they did it. And so, yeah, it was, and that's where, again, having to build skill sets or realize you have some giftedness or some talents in real time,
Yeah.
I think was crucial for me.
Yeah.
So, doing things like that was big for me in my journey. But the other part of this question, I think that's tough, is how is it shaped your approach to leadership? Is that kind of how we phrase that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. When I think of, again, my journey, my personal story, all of that homeschooled camp ministry, church stuff, I've learned a few lessons over the years. And one of them is to slow down, because for me, not only did I go through these different, I would call them small journeys. Like, hey, I was homeschooled, and then all of a sudden I was homeschooled, but yet I had a full-time job. And then I went from having a full-time job being homeschooled to having a full-time career in building construction and getting married. I got married young. I was 20 years old when I got married. So that's another part of the journey I haven't even talked about yet.
Yeah.
Everything was fast-paced. All the programs at camp, boom, 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 one week after another week. You got two or three different teen weeks. Then you have the blind crew come in. Then you have, the family weekends. And you have, so it was really fast-paced. And then church was the same way. We had a program every other night. I was here for Wednesday night kids program. I would help babysit kids on Thursday evenings, and we were here again twice on Sundays. Everything was quick. And this didn't really click to me personally until years later when I was actually here at this church. And a few years ago, Foad, our teaching elder, he made this comment of something he heard, and it's just a simple little comment of somebody saying to somebody else who was living a rushed lifestyle, like always something to do, always something on the schedule. Yeah. He said, you're living a NASCAR life trying to follow a savior who walked everywhere. You're living a NASCAR life trying to follow a savior who walked everywhere. And that, for me, I had to learn that lesson 2 or 3 times over the years, but I think it finally solidified in the last few years of just being able to say, leadership happens in the moment. I'm a big thinker. I'm like, let's just get to the end of the plan here. I know it's like a 3-year plan. I don't care. I just want to get to the goal. And by doing that, I think in retrospect, probably missed opportunities like this, just to connect with someone, and to really slow down.
Well, Foad, our pastor, our teaching elder, uses the African proverb often. Many of you have probably heard, if you want to go fast, go alone.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to go slow, if you want to go far, you go together,
You know,
which is a slow down mentality.
oh, it is. But that's part of what, I learned, and part of what we teach here. If one of the things that we're supposed to be as leaders is a resource for other people,
Yeah,
you
indeed.
can't do that when you move too fast.
No.
And so for me, I had to realize this isn't about like just getting programs on the calendar. It's not about just filling the building with people, or, this is really about influencing other people,
Yeah.
right? Or adding value to them and to their journey and to their story. I can't be a resource if I'm moving too quick.
Yeah,
So-
it's almost like it's not about my agenda, it's about the agenda and helping us get there rather than, and I struggle with that as well, just
absolutely.
at times, wanting to just push through.
Yeah, you're kind of a 30,000 foot view guy. You
I
can
am.
see the destination.
That's my default mindset, is looking at things 30,000 feet, and I've already seen the 6 steps we're going to need to get through there, and waiting for everybody to catch along and say,
Yeah.
oh yeah,
You're on step 6, they're on step 2,
yeah,
like in their minds.
those are indeed the steps we need, and we can't get around them, kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, so I got to slow down enough to be a resource. And what that really takes for me, and one thing I've mentioned on the podcast before, you and I have talked about this a lot. One of the ways I've learned to do this is through, watching my dad. And my dad taught me balance. That was huge for me to learn that lesson. Everything in life, you have to balance. And for me, in what I do now, looking back to, through my journey and how I've learned how to balance things, has allowed me to slow down and be a resource. So I think, that's super, super important. And luckily I get to work, with a church and with a group of people who practice, things like rest and things like, hey, your family comes first. And, if you need to take a day, you need to take a day or whatever. So that also allows me to balance things. So I would say, for me, to answer that question as simply as I can, how has your experience or journey shaped who you are in your approach to leadership? I think I've learned to slow down, to be a resource, and to balance. And that's
Those are the big areas.
yeah. But it's been 25 years or so of leading people to, I know I'm old.
Figure that out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To figure that out.
What about, you talked about your younger life, your career. Let's talk a little more recent real quick before we move on.
Oh, sure.
And I'll answer the question too. What about marriage, having children? Is there anything in that experience that lent leadership lessons?
Yeah. So let's take marriage, for example, because we were, kind of high school sweethearts. We were married really young. She was 18. I was 20. Don't tell my girls, they already figured that out, but
They can do the math.
Yeah. And we wouldn't change that we talk about that every once in a while. My wife and I will talk about our journey together. We wouldn't change the fact that we got married young. We have a great marriage. We have a great family. But looking back, and what was your particular question? I want to make sure I answered it.
Yeah. Was there anything from being married, getting married, being, or having kids that were lessons that lent to your leadership journey?
For sure. I think, the biggest thing for me, I think, was service and humility, because when you take the Christian faith and you apply it in your marriage, we're supposed to love our wives as Christ loved the church, which really is making every decision that I make as a man needs to be with my wife's best interest at heart.
It's a sacrifice.
It's a sacrifice, but it's one of service.
Yeah.
So I have to live in service of my wife. And that really has taught me, if leadership is about serving other people, if it's about, adding value to them, which is doing them a service.
Yeah.
I look at my leadership, how I approach leadership through the eyes of service.
Yes.
I think my marriage helped to teach me that. Also the humility part of it.
Yeah.
I can be stubborn and arrogant and, that hot-headed Italian, Sicilian blood, whatever you want to call it. I've had to learn how to be humble and how to take a back seat, those kinds of things. And again, those in leadership, they translate to phrases like, it's not about me. It's about other people.
And it's not just, it's primary for you and I. It's our faith in Christ that lends us to want to be servanthood leadership, because that's the way he did it.
Right.
It's the way Jesus did it.
Right.
But just practically speaking, you and I have come to realize, even if that, heaven forbid, didn't exist, it's the most rewarding and realistic way to be a leader. Because if we just think of ourselves, and we've talked about this before, if I'm leading for me, it's a very small world. It's me, 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 me.
Right.
But if I'm leading to help others, impact them, help them raise up to a level of potential they don't see in themselves yet, like you talked about in the ropes course,
Right.
that is such a bigger universe to operate in.
Yeah.
So, and I'm so thankful that he set that example for
Oh,
us.
for sure.
So,
Yeah. And I mean,
agreed.
it kind of reminds me of that whole quote. I don't know. I don't remember who said this. Maybe you will. But if you think you're in leadership and you turn around and look and no one's following you, you're just out for a walk.
That's Maxwell. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's our favorite leader.
Maxwell.
He says, if you think you're a leader and you happen to turn around and see no one there, you're just out for a
You're out
walk.
for a
You're not
walk.
a leader. Yeah.
But, and I think of, the again, you asked specifically about marriage and raising kids. If I can't lead my family, and by lead, I mean serve them so that they respect and they'll follow,
your
my
leadership.
my leadership, then I'm out for a walk already. So
Yeah.
I've already failed in that, in leadership.
And just to say, it's a partnership with your wife in doing that, right?
Yeah, no, it definitely is. You learn networking, through parenting.
Just practically.
You
practically
practically
have a team.
You got to have a team. I mean, I got some close friends who will speak into my kids' lives. Obviously, my wife and I together.
Takes a village, right?
It really does. I would hate to be isolated and be a parent. That would suck. So having the network of the church and just some really close friends to help with that is really big for Al and I. But some of those leadership lessons I've learned through being a dad. Is more of the adding value, because I would love to be able to just say, okay, this is who I want you to become, and this is the steps you're going to take to get there. You can't do that in parenting.
Yeah,
like the girls are going to become their own unique individuals. They'll have bits of me in them. They'll have bits of their parents. Hopefully, they'll have a lot more of the Lord, right? But it's one of those things where I can't also save you from every mistake you make. I have to walk alongside you when you make them and be there for you, but I can't save you from every single one of those.
Yes.
You have to learn lessons on your own. So all of that translates into leadership.
It does.
I can't be a micromanager. I have to allow, the folks I'm leading to experience life for themselves, to experience leadership for themselves, to experience failure for themselves. And then what are they going to do with that? So that all happens, I think, in the context of parenting.
Yeah, as dads, you and I, we've talked about this before. We want to create a safe environment for our kids to make the mistakes here at home and have them learn as many lessons here before they get out in the world.
Yeah.
And they're still going to make mistakes in the world, and they'll still learn from them, but they'll have a practice of having a safe and feel safe to make mistakes, right?
Yeah.
When we talk about just because you make a mistake, you're not a mistake. And that's where that comes from.
Yeah, my wife and I were in a conversation recently. It just brings to mind this. I don't remember if it was a question that was asked, but when we think of parenting, there's one phrase that would mean success in parenting to me and Al, and that is if we are the first phone call. Meaning, if my daughters, God forbid, they end up at some sort of situation where they don't feel safe, they're at a party that's gone bad, they get themselves pregnant. I don't know what could happen. God forbid, they make some decisions that, they think if they call dad, he's going to come down with an iron fist, is not a good thing. I want to be that first phone call to know, hey, I'm in trouble. I need to talk to my dad, or I'm in trouble. I need to talk to my mom. That would be, I think, parental success in my mind.
Yeah.
So that's how we approach our parenting, but it also should be how we approach our leadership.
Yes.
If somebody under us is like fearful to call us,
to tell they made a mistake or
yeah,
did
we're
wrong.
we're not adding value to them.
No.
We're pushing them. We're not out in front of them, leading them. Yeah. So I think that's yet another lesson I've learned. Be the first phone call.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
So
I like that a lot.
Yeah. What about you? I spent some time answering this first question. How has Bill's experience and journey shaped who Bill is and his approach to leadership?
Yeah, there's a lot of key experiences that shape Bill.
So start maybe when you were younger.
So I'm kind of debated about sharing this. It's kind of, it's personal. Maybe it's TMI, but take it for what it is. I hope it helps somebody.
Sure it will.
When I was younger, I'm an introvert, proud card-carrying member of Introverts R Us. I like having deeper relationships with fewer people than shallow. Not that they're shallow relationships, right? But I don't need to feel like I need to have so many So I always valued that. So I wasn't always looking to be the center of attention.
Sure. Yeah.
And I really valued the friendships I had. Growing through childhood into puberty, I got acne really bad as a kid. It was deep under the skin. It was on the surface, and it was like golf ball size on my back and what have you. Left a lot of scars. I just remember being in junior high one time, walking to my locker, someone tapped me on the shoulder, and I dropped to the floor in pain because they just happened to hit a welt the right way or the wrong way. So that instilled a lot of fear in me. That's still a lot of self-consciousness in me.
Insecurity.
Yeah, but along came a leader. His name was Ron James.
Yeah, you talked about him before.
Talked about him before. He was one of my mentors. He's like a second father to me. And no one can take place of my father, but Ron was very special as well. He did what we talked about in the podcast. I learned this from him. You know, you coach to their performance, but you speak to their potential. And he was always speaking to me about my potential, and he didn't see what was going on with my skin and difficulty and, you know, kind of thing. And he encouraged me to, you know, take my shirt off, get the sun on to help clear it up. And he would take me on hikes, and I would sweat, and you'd see all the bumps on my back because of how sweaty I was. And he didn't care. Yeah. And he just showed acceptance and encouragement. And he was one of the first ones that came and said, Bill, I want you to come back moved on to the senior high youth group. He said, Bill, I want you to come back, and I want you to teach and lead the lesson for the junior high class because they're looking up to you. I said, they're looking up to me? He says, oh yeah, they talk about you. You're being watched, right? Whether you realize or not, you're being watched. Yeah. And it's one of the reasons why we agree with Maxwell that leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. If you have influence, you are a leader to some degree.
Yeah.
So that was a big lesson in processing the emotions and physical hurt I felt internally as a result of the skin condition. Took years, decades.
Wow.
But the big lesson learned there is, in short, a scar, emotional or physical, is a sign of two things. It's a sign of a wound, but it's also a sign of being healed. So, and allowing that growth process and that healing process to take place and just accept that as part of my identity, you know, those wounds, those hurts, whatever they are, and just welcome them instead of fight and push them away and delay the growth process. And I've seen people do this, unfortunately. I've seen a distant family member who just pushed things away from the hurt, and they never emotionally got past the age of 19. You know, they got into their retirement years, and they just never grew up because they wouldn't surrender to the growth process of the hurts that they experienced. So that was a big, huge benefit. Entry got me into leadership. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for Ron.
Yeah, which was going to be my next question is, we don't really think about this too much, but in retrospect, how different do you think Bill would be without the person of Ron James?
Oh, I'm terribly different, hugely different.
Yeah.
I would have gone down a really dark path.
Because Ron sounds like somebody who obviously embodied
very much
a lot of what we're teaching here on this podcast. So that's got to be a major influence on you.
And Ron didn't do it just for me. I mean, he did it for numerous teenagers, and he did it. Ron was a mentor of mine for decades. I first met him in junior high. He was my junior high youth leader at my church. And then when I moved up to senior high, he also moved up to senior high youth leadership. I graduated and went to college about an hour away, and he had then moved to a church that was like 30 minutes from my college.
Oh, wow. So he stayed connected.
And then he stayed connected, and he said, hey, Bill, we got a new church, got a young college-age Bible study I'm leading. Do you want to come? I'm like, it's Ron. Yes, I want to come. Yeah. And then Ron, in the meantime, in my college years, started building a retirement home on a lake. He's a mechanical engineer, so he got out his CAD program. He designed the house himself. He built everything It was like an Amish barn raising experience.
Oh, wow.
On the weekends, everybody who knew Ron, who Ron had touched their lives, would come and volunteer their time, help work on building the house on weekends. End of the day, we'd go swimming in the lake or water skiing or whatever, right? So, and at the end of the house was near completion. He put the locks on the doors. He said, Bill, here's a key. He said, you have invested more time than anybody in this house. You deserve to come here anytime you want.
Wow.
So that was Ron.
Yeah.
So he was a big, big influence on me, just helping to grow in my emotional intelligence, accepting who I am, not wanting to try to be someone else I'm not. So, and that, he helped me start that journey. I'm still working on that journey at my age.
Well, we all do. We all struggle with it over the years.
But the older I get, the easier it becomes. You know, when you hit 50, at least, you know, I don't mind. I'm 57 right now at the time of this recording. When I get into my early 50s, it's like I feel really comfortable in who I am. I really got to that place where I don't care if you like me or not, because my identity is not based on your opinion of me.
Right.
Because I have the network of relationships, friendships, and of course, my faith and my vertical relationship with my Savior as well. That's where my identity is, and it's rock solid.
Yeah.
So, and Ron started that process, and I haven't arrived. I still struggle with it here and there, but
So if Ron started it, obviously, you know, you met Julie and you got married, and so same question back on you. How is
marriage,
that? How has your marriage kind of played into your journey, your approach to leadership? What lessons have you taken from there?
Yeah.
Parenting and all of that.
Before I answer, I'm going to back up and say I went into youth ministry. I became a youth pastor, and it was not just the behest of Ron. It was the behest of several people around me. And as a result of going back to school for a second degree in youth ministry and the lessons learned there, and I've had several Ron-type people in my life at different stages. And forgive me I preach this. I'll not stop talking about this because it's so real, true, and proven decades after decade. More is caught than taught. I have learned more from leaders who have just come into my life, and I watched them lead. Jared, including you, we are so different, but we're also very complementary. And I watch, oh, wow, he did that way. Yeah, he's an introvert. Of course he did it that way. But that's something for me to keep in mind. Could I do that? Yeah, I could probably do that as a one-off. And if that's really a tool I need to take out of the leadership toolbox and apply in this circumstance. So all that to say, Ron is not alone. There's been several mentors in my life that through my marriage, through my young adult, and even my older years, I look at Foad and I watch him, how he leads, our pastor. And he's 6, 7 years my senior. And he's just an amazing man of character, regardless of being a man of faith or not. But I think being a man of faith is what molded his character, for sure.
Yeah. Not even a question. So
background for my marriage, I met my wife when she was 10 years old. I'm 2.5 years older than she is. So you guys can do the math. So I was like 12 and a half. Her oldest brother, she was the youngest of 3 kids. It was Peter, Andy, and Julie. And I married Julie. Peter started dating and married my sister long before Julie and I were interested in each other. And through high school, even though we went to different high schools, Andy became my best friend through high school. So I was in and out of their homes all the time. My future in-laws were calling me their third son long before we started dating or were interested in each other. Just tight family. And I got to the point in my life where, and again, this is a fallout from the skin condition I had. No one's going to love me. I'm scarred. Who's going to love me? Who's going to want someone like me that's damaged as I am? And I got to the point like, is anybody else, is she going to love me? And I just look at people on the street. Well, I wonder if she would ever love me. No, would she love me? And I always looked at women, potential dating candidates, kind of obsessively. And one year I'm like, this can't be good for my health, my mental health.
Your mental health, yeah.
So I said, you know what? I'm going to take a year. I fasted. I stopped thinking about women. And in addition to that, I turned off all media. I turned off going to the movies, renting movies. on watching TV, canceled my cable TV. I was living alone in an apartment at the time. And I just focused on studying, reading, and going to work. And I was volunteering at my church at the time and doing engaged in that. And about not even 5 months into that 1 year self-commitment of doing that, someone came to me in a group. We were having a church group study, and saying, what's different? There's something different about you. Mm-hmm. What happened? People are watching. Yeah. People watch you, and it matters. It really matters, the decisions we make.
So you're learning this lesson again.
Yeah. So I'm learning this again through, of pre-marriage of, wow, what I'm doing and what I'm digesting into my life has influence over me, whether I realize it or not. And that was a big wake-up call. And I became more emotionally healthier, more mature. I mean, I was still in my early 20s, but there was a big jump in that year because of those decisions I made. And it was when I wasn't looking, I found, right? Kind of a side note, my future wife, Julie, would go to a school about an hour from where I grew up. And my dad worked about halfway there. So he would be often called, hey, would you mind bringing Julie home? Because my house and Julie's house were like 5 minutes apart from each other. And my dad would be happy to do that. And there'd be one time, he said, no, I can't do it this time. And he would come, Bill, can you go get Julie and bring her home? So I went. I love telling this story, but I went to pick her up and got the message, it was pre-text messaging. This is a long time ago. That, hey,
smoke signals.
Yeah, well, she would be babysitting over here for the RA in this building, and she would meet me over in this one. So I got to the school, and I was walking across the grounds, and here comes this person with a baby on her front, the front pack thing. Yeah. And that just, that's put her in a different light that I never noticed before. Because I certainly wanted kids. I wanted to have family. I wanted to do what my dad did for me, for my own children, kind of thing. So I'm like, okay. So that kind of flipped the switch in my head, like, all right, maybe. So it got to the end of this year it was near the end of the year. I picked her up and I waited to the end of the year and I said, how about we go out on a date? She's like, really? Yes. So that kind of what led to that. Giving space to grow where you're planted and not rush things is going to make you made me a better, stronger, and well-grounded leader. Specifically in my relationship with Julie. In my relationship, Julie and I, we're not perfect. We get in the moments of, I love you, I just don't like you right now, kind of thing, right? But we are hard and fast committed, period. Divorce is a word that and nobody goes into a marriage going, yes, I can't wait to get divorced, or I expect this. Hopefully not, but we're very committed to it and we remain to, even through the emotions of it and what have you.
Committed to each other.
Committed. And that's another lesson learned, right, is leadership is a service for others. Yeah. And it's a commitment. It's almost a calling, right? When I was in college, I was a firefighter in EMT. In fact, I was on 3 different fire departments at one time. I was on a college-age department, a town department, and a county department. It was used for backup for larger fires. They were really called 3. Yeah, so 3 different departments. And that was a commitment, right? So learning commitment to sacrifice for others was something that well learned and played out in my marriage with Julie. And the other thing is with my children, all my children, my youngest now is 21. We're going to be empty nesters very soon, we expect. I've watched parents go, I want my child to be a doctor. I want my child to do this. No, you're going to do it this way. My dad said, I don't know, Bill, it's what you feel like you're gifted at and what you want to do. I'm not going to tell you how to live your life, right? So I wanted my kids to become the best of them they could be. And I'm very proud of who they've turned out to be. They have very high levels of emotional intelligence and maturity and capability and very successful, each in their own way. Watching them, being the audience to their growth and development and being privileged to have them partake in it, most of which they've learned on their own. I was just kind of a coach, guidance, right? Resource, as you said, absolutely, is a big lesson. And that really plays into leadership.
Yeah.
It's never my agenda to come in and make someone grow in this way. Right. It's to have conversations, ask questions to help them reveal in their own thinking of the areas they need to grow. Right? So that was another big lesson in my marriage. So
it's interesting, man, when you just listening to you talk, it brings up so many other rabbit trails or questions, that you could
ask
that
them.
I could take.
Yeah, let's talk about them.
No, I mean just one. I mean you talked about this idea of commitment.
Yeah.
And you talked about how you learned commitment through, the firefighting, through, different experiences that you had. Specifically, if you could, how are you exercising commitment right now? Like, show us, this is when I learned it, but this is what it looks like today.
Yeah. Practically speaking, that's ongoing in the marriage. That never stops.
Okay, so marriage is one.
Marriage is one. So about a year or two ago, I read an article in the news where they went to 100 young newly married couples and 100 senior couples, retired, still married. And they asked both groups the same question. The question was, is love a feeling or is it a commitment? And almost all the younger couples said, it's a feeling.
Yeah.
And almost all the older couples, it's a commitment, right? So I am in that journey. Waking up and telling my wife every morning, I choose you, and showing her that, right? And I've mentioned this to you before. Recently, I heard a YouTube video where a guy was saying, I know what my wife needs. She needs to feel safe, right? She needs to feel safe that I'm not going to respond harshly to her. She's going to need to feel safe. I'm not going to go watch pornography when I'm frustrated with her. She needs to feel safe that I'm going to carry her and help her and encourage her. And there's that kind of whole rounded safety. That's a lesson I'm still practicing. I'm not perfect at it, right? And I'm far from perfect at it. But I think I'm getting a little better every day at it.
And how does that transition from the marriage then into, say, your vocation?
Yeah, so
your leadership role via commitment.
Growing where you're planted, right? So my aspiration is to have one more promotion, one vertical before I retire. It's selfish. Do I need it? No. My current job is paying all our bills. We're living within our means. We're saving for retirement. We'll be okay. We won't be well off, but we'll be just okay in retirement, I think. But I still have that ambition of getting that. But there's been fewer and fewer opportunities in my current company, right? But I am so proud of my company in the respect of how they treat their employees that I don't want to go anywhere else.
So you're committed.
I am committed to them, even though there's no promotional opportunities right now at this time. And there may be a year or 2 year, whatever, it may change, right? And I tell people that I would rather have a mediocre job at a great company than have a great job at a mediocre company. I've told you that before, right? Because the environment in which I work is so healthy. The people I work with are so encouraging. They truly are great leaders at multiple levels in my company. Not perfect leaders. I still get frustrated and like, what did you make that decision for? And I try to sit down and have conversations, right? And there's here in church, our leadership, we walk towards the messes. We keep short accounts. We don't wait. We heard someone said this. We don't wait until they approach us. We go talk to them and said, I heard this was said. I heard we have a problem. Let's talk about this. What's going on? How can I fix this? Or how can I mend this? Or whatever it is. I've taken that from church setting into a work setting, right? because I value where I work and I want to make sure it stays healthy, I'm committed to it. So I'm committed to growing 1% every day, at least in leadership and skills and all different things, whether I get a increased pay out as it not, right?
Yeah.
If worst case scenario, it's only going to be make me better, a better employee, bring more return on my impact at work or my, the activities I'm doing at work.
Yeah.
And hopefully it will make me more attractional for when the opportunities do come around.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how that's played out.
Yeah.
And my favorite thing still, just to close this answer out, my favorite thing still is to be the audience and watch people grow. That's why I love mentoring leaders at work, which I've done and still do.
Yeah.
So
No, that's wonderful. It really is. Let's do one more. Let's do one more question for each of us.
Yeah.
In this, I think I had to think through this question a little bit. I knew it was coming, but we didn't, like we said, we didn't have like crazy notes for this conversation.
We didn't.
In leading others, what is your most valuable tool? I mean, we reflected on our whole journey, lessons we've learned, things we've taken from our personal stories into our leadership roles.
Yep.
What's the one thing, the one most valuable tool? If you had to pick one thing,
Easy.
and that is
Easy. My voice.
your voice.
Communication. It's the number one vehicle through which we influence others.
So for you, it's your voice.
Yeah. So it's a matter of learning to connect before you correct. It's a matter of people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. It's
So
actually
using
making
your voice
those,
in those areas.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Long story short, and I'll try to make this shorter. I have had repeatedly over the decades a history of being able to connect well with people and make them feel comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
Way back when I was, I think, a junior in high school, there was a young lady in my youth group who was a year, I think she was a year younger than I was. 10th grade, going to my school, not having great relationship with her parents. One night, her mom got really mad at her and smacked her across the face hard. And I'm at home alone one night, and it's a snowstorm. We're getting 6-7 inches of snow, and our outside lights are off because we're not expecting anybody in the snowstorm. And the doorbell rings, and it's her in a jean jacket, having walked 2.5 miles to my house. And she chose me because I made her feel safe and comfortable, right? It was my voice that helped her, right? I actually care about people. I'm an introvert. I need to recharge. I need to disconnect from the people for a while to recharge my batteries. But that doesn't mean I don't care and love people. So, and fortunately, I didn't know what I was doing. I called Ron, my youth leader, and he was already set up as a foster parent. So he took over. I got her talking and willing enough to go over to visit Ron, and things healed. They got to counseling. They healed the relationship, both between the mother, father, and daughter, and she went back and grew to be a very healthy young lady. Happy ending, fortunately. But even I've got now 25 years in the help desk industry, and I used to take phone calls. I know, been on there. And the one comment I would get from customers, and I still get it now as a leader frequently, at least 2, 3, 4 times a year. Wow, your voice, it just makes me feel so relaxed, so comfortable, Or it's of, your voice. You should be the voice on those meditation apps is what you should do, right?
Yeah.
So, and I've learned that I've caught the pattern of comments and going, oh, that's a skill I have. What if I were intentional about that? What if I were intentional?
Honed it in. Yeah.
I can't fix your problems for you, but I can come alongside and encourage you through those problems, right? Speak to your potential, coach to your performance using this voice, right?
Yeah.
So that is a big tool, realizing that communication is the number one vehicle through which we influence others. And our goal is to help them grow in their potential, right? Just not professionally, but personally as well, right? We want them to grow as people. And knowing that my voice is a piece of that. So
Great. It's a great answer.
what about you? What about you?
Well, I think the number one most valuable tool for me is my ears. And I say that very specifically. I'm an extrovert, so I talk all the time. Outgoing. I mean, part of what I do is teach.
Oh.
Every week, 2 or 3 times a week, I'm teaching. I'm using my voice, and I agree with 100% what you just said. Obviously, that's why we're doing this podcast.
Right.
Your voice really is your number one. But when I'm answering this question personally, I say ears because over the years, I've learned or had to learn how to listen. And I don't just mean listening with my ears, I mean listening with my eyes too. Like in your marriage when you're like, yeah, hon, that's great news. Yeah, yeah. And you're like, oh, that's good. Like they want your physical eyes, to be looking at them. And what I've noticed is I can't lead other people to a place they're not willing to go. So I have to listen and figure out, really, where are you?
What are you willing to do?
What are you willing to do? Where are you willing to go? Why are you the person you are? I don't have to ask those questions specifically, but I have to be listening. And sometimes I've noticed for me when I also had to learn how to listen to respond, not listen to react.
Yeah.
So if I'm just or listening to hear rather than listening to respond,
Right.
is another big one. So if I'm listening to you speak, am I the whole time thinking what I'm going to say next? Listening just for the sake of responding to you?
Right.
Or am I really listening to what you're telling me?
And understanding first.
Understanding first before I use my voice.
Then you formulate the response.
Yeah. So for me, I kind of had to put my voice on hold to use my ears and learn really what it means to lead others through listening. Which I think too is, I've shared this on the podcast before, and you've heard me use the story before. I don't know why this is the way that it is. Maybe it's part of just being extroverted. Maybe it's just my face. I don't know. But I will meet someone, talking randomly, like at a gas station, or, they stopped at a yard sale that I stopped at.
Yep.
And I'll somehow end up in this conversation with this person. And they're telling me things that they probably haven't told their therapist. Yeah. And of course, I'm exaggerating that. Yep. But I'll go back and talk to my wife after being away from her for 3 minutes. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's so-and-so. I bumped into him, and he ended up telling me this, that, and he's from this place, and he does this for a job, and he's got 3 kids and a dog named Scruffy, and and she's like just looking at me like, how did you do that? How did you get all that information in 3 minutes?
Yeah.
And so for me, I've always been able to connect, but it's really listening to actually be able to understand, because what you do with that information that you just gathered in 3 minutes is going to be huge. How am I now going to use that to lead this person or to connect more deeply with the person?
Yeah.
So I had to really listen. And sometimes you got to listen twice. And I say listen twice because sometimes you'll hear a person share a story, and if you don't ask the follow-up question, they're not going to learn anything from it.
Right.
So I have to think through now, not only am I hearing you speak, but I also want to be able to ask you a pointed question that really will help you draw out the own answer of what you learned through that experience. That's all ears. That's all listening to understand. So that's why when I really began to think through this question, it's got to be for me, my ears.
Yeah, yeah.
But because I could talk like I am right now all day.
Well, we it's value added. I think
it's all part of it.
Both you and I have learned the lesson. Okay, I'm about to go into this conversation. How can I add value to this person?
Yeah.
I'm about to sit down in the restaurant. How can I add value to the waitress? Mm-hmm. Right? Or, I'm going to the bank and I'm talking to the bank. How can I add a little piece of encouragement or value to this person, in this short conversation, right? Yeah. And that's a mindset to develop, and doesn't come natural because we have our agenda. We have you and I. We're task orientated, and we get this done, right? But to slow down and say, how can I add value?
Condensing too. This isn't even on the list, but your ability. One of the valuable tools I've learned from you is condensing. So for me, I've noticed in the past, I'm like, what would Bill say? And it's funny
That's a
because
dangerous question.
No, but it helps because you have these stupid one-liners where we'll have sat and talked with you for 15 minutes, and then you'll say exactly what I said in 15 minutes with one sentence. Yeah. You'll summarize or condense. And so I've kind of been trying to learn that, not necessarily for teaching, although it does help me in teaching, but conversational. So when I'm meeting someone at the gas station or at the grocery store or the ice cream shop or whatever, and they open up about something, whether it's extremely deep or just kind of a little bit deeper than surface level, and I have kind of a one-off, thing to say that it'll actually leave them really thinking.
Yeah.
I think that's huge for those moments. So I'm trying to learn what it is to listen to someone, again, why I put ears, and then be able to just say one thing, respond with one thing instead of, let's pick up this conversation. Here's my card. Call me at my office. That whole weird thing.
Yeah.
So that's.
Yeah. And honestly, that was the other thing I get commented on frequently year over year is, Bill, you have the ability to take ideas and concepts and make it sound really simple.
That's right.
So
for sure. But this has been great. I mean, just maybe real briefly, where do you want to go from here? We wanted to ask that question.
In my leadership.
In your leadership journey, where does Bill want to go from here? Home? You're all talked out?
No, actually, this is a small setting. I could do this for hours. And it's easy to do it with a very close friend.
Yeah, there you
go. For me, I think it's surrendering more of myself to serve others better. Because I really, really do believe in not making my life about me. Because it's about legacy.
Yeah.
And it's about people impacted. I have mentored people who have gone on and been promoted above me. Awesome. They're living to their potential. They're using their gifts, their talents. And I was able to be a piece of that journey. And now I'm the audience, right? More of that I would love. And it's, honestly, one of my motivations for doing this podcast.
Yeah.
Just hoping that we could touch more people's lives, not because I need accolades, not because I need money. Not that we're, Jared and I, honestly, if this becomes a revenue stream for us,
booyah.
We have plans to tithe and donate. And so, we've talked about that. So we're not necessarily looking to get rich off this. Priority number one is I want to have the opportunity to impact more people's lives.
To add value to people.
Just to add value, period. And if I never hear from you and you never give me, great. If something's come of this that's impacted you and you changed and you learned, and
let us know. It'll be super encouraging.
People are watching me anyway, right? You have influence. We all have influence. So it's a matter of us, at least me, trying to be more intentional with that influence. Yeah. That's all.
It's good.
Yeah. What about you?
Where do I want to go next? This is going to sound really stupid and cheesy and cliche, but I want to go to whatever is next. I look at, the people like yourself who, another 10 years or so, 10, 15 years older, people who are in different seasons. It's, for me, some of that is scary, but some of it is, I do want to experience my girls graduating, or going to college, or I want to experience, being at their wedding, or, I want to be the old guy on the rocking chair with a ton of wisdom, smoking a pipe and talking to some kid, who's working on my farm or something. I don't know. But it's one of those things where I want to keep adding the knowledge so that I can continue to each season have stuff to give out. Yeah. So I think for me, it's not necessarily, I don't want like the next, I don't want to become a senior pastor for the sake of becoming a senior pastor. I don't want to, become a business owner for the sake of becoming a business owner. It's not like a next promotion or position for me. It's similar to you. I just want to be in the next season of growth.
Grow where you're planted.
Grow where I'm planted and see what happens, with that. So it's kind of a different way to answer the question, because when I first looked at it, I'm like, I don't know where I want to be. Yeah. Other than, because I've always taught, I shouldn't say always, I've learned to teach, focusing on who you want to be rather than what you want to do. And I don't think that goes away. For the longest time, I would teach it thinking, you'll eventually get there. Like I'm kind of like who I want to be and whatever. Right. I'm definitely not who I want to be. Right. I still got things I want to learn, things I want to do, want to accomplish and all that. Yeah. So I think for me, it's just, what is next, whatever that is, have I grown enough to handle it, to go there and to tackle it? Yeah. So it's kind of a interesting question.
It is. And, I think we've talked about this before, just remaining teachable. Yeah. I don't ever be so closed-minded that we can't grow more. Mm-hmm. Right.
But it does feel like a weird answer because some people would say, well, I want to write a book or I want to do this. And it's
Yeah.
like, yeah, I have aspirations too, but I don't want that to become the answer to this particular question.
I agree with that. Yeah, that's not the purpose of leadership anyway.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
All right.
Cool. Well, this seems like an awesome spot to take a break for you and I anyway. So
Yeah, thanks for joining
Yeah.
us. Thanks for listening this long. Again, life lessons from
yeah,
two guys with combined 50 years of experience,
things like commitment, and being a resource and slowing down and
growing and
growing where you're planted. Yeah. It's all stuff we've talked about on the podcast. You can go back and look and find specific episodes, but it's been great just to sit and talk, and hopefully you enjoyed and benefited.
Yeah, I hope you get a little better understanding of the wheels turning inside our heads and how we think about things. And please reach out, leave a comment, ask a question, tell us about your leadership journey. What is one thing that impacted you most? Or what's one big lesson, or better yet, what's one person who had the greatest impact in your leadership journey, your growth? So leave a comment. We'd love to hear from you.
And we'll see you next time.
Take care. Bye.